Hello again. My name is Mike. I'm a chaplain with Trinity of Christ Ministries. I'm also a relationship coach specializing in intimacy and infidelity issues. And today we're talking about how an affair warps your reality. Um, we all know that affair partners, uh, as well as our spouses, are living in a fantasy world. They're not living in reality. Of course, they don't realize this, nor will they realize this probably until everything falls apart most of the time, unfortunately. Um, so, how does the affair warp the reality of the person that's involved in the affair? You know, we often hear from people that, I don't even recognize my husband or my wife anymore. They're a completely different person. Um, they don't act the same. There's not a connection between us anymore. And so the reason for this is because um, they're seeing their life through a filter. The the filter is what we call a fair fog, and it's fogging up their brain just like a real fog. When you're driving down the road, it's real foggy. You can't see ahead real clear. Affairs work the same way as the fog in the brain of the person that's having the affair. This is coming from dopamine hits and limerence and different things like that. So what it does basically is hijacks their brain, um, and they see things through in a much different light. It's filtered what they see. This is why we always say they're not living in reality, because they're not. They will never believe that, but everybody but them can see it, especially the person they're cheating on. When you've been with someone a long time, you know this person. You know their habits. You know how they typically would respond to certain situations, how they react to certain things. And so you'll be the first to see it before anybody on the outside does. But it is often noticed from people that associate with them on a pretty regular basis. So you may not be the only one that sees this sudden change in this person. Um, this person will often feel that they have clarity. They will confuse the fog with clarity. They'll think that they are seeing things clearly for the first time in their lives. Um, they will, see this new relationship in a totally new light. Uh, you know, uh, just showing them new things that they never saw before. This is the feeling they'll get because this is what a fair fog does to your brain. Um, this leads to bad decisions. It leads to irrational decisions and things of that nature. Um, they'll also glorify the affair partner. This is why I often tell people who are being cheated on to not try to compete with the affair partner, because you can't. This person is a fantasy. Your reality. You don't stand a chance in the brain of the person that's cheating, because this person isn't, reality. So you're not going to compete with that, because in their mind, they're going to glorify this affair partner, and they're going to credit them with all these wonderful things, that they see in this person. So that's why I always say, don't ever think you can compete with an affair partner, because it's not real. You can't compete with fantasy. And that's exactly what it is. It's a fantasy. Affairs live in fantasy. Uh, you also notice a lot of times a distortion of their perception. They'll perceive things in a distorted view. Again, that's a fair fog. They're not seeing clearly. They're not seeing reality. They're seeing everything from these big dopamine hits they're getting from the affair. So it distorts their perception of things. The biggest consequence of this is usually they'll see the spouse in a negative light. They will they'll rewrite history in their mind. Their brain will rewrite the relationship, the marriage. It gets rewritten into a negative light. This comes back to the word you'll hear all the time, cognitive dissonance. This is the brain's uh, reconciliation process. We do not like to be seen as a bad person. When we're doing something that goes against our morals, our brain gets very uncomfortable, because it sees, wait a minute, cheating is wrong. We've always believed this, but now you're cheating. So now your brain is in conflict. It's fighting against its beliefs, because you're doing something that your brain says, whoa, I thought this was wrong. So it has to negotiate with itself to justify what you're doing. Cognitive dissonance. This is extremely common, almost universally common in anybody that's having an affair. Um, we don't want to be the villain, so our brain fights itself to try to reason why we're doing what we're doing, no matter what justifications we may feel. So this is where the brain goes into rewriting history. Well, you know, my marriage was really never that great. This person, my husband, my wife, they, a lot of flaws, they did this, they do that, it's and what this is the brain rewriting history to try to reconcile why you are doing what you are doing. This is making it easier to cope with itself. Well, I'm only doing this because they did that, or they don't do this, or, it was never a good marriage from the beginning. It's always been rocky. This is where they'll inflate things. If you're having an affair, you'll inflate things in your mind that is wrong in the marriage. You'll see these huge flaws in your partner that really were never an issue before, but now all of a sudden they're huge. You know, uh, he goes bowling every Saturday night. We can never do anything. We're used to, you probably enjoyed the time by yourself to, kind of do what you wanted to do. But now all of a sudden it's a huge problem, because he's in a bowling league, and he goes bowling on Saturday nights, So this is part of the reconciliation process of your brain justifying the affair, justifying why you're doing it. So just keep in mind that this is very normal, and this comes along with a cognitive dissonance. It's also losing touch with the future or the past. You hear this a lot from people who have had affairs. Um, they don't really see the past the way they used to. They see it kind of from a negative perspective or a cloudy perspective. They fail to see the good times, like maybe when you first got married. And, one of my favorite memories of when we when I first met my wife and we started our relationship was how much we struggled. It was a very big struggle. Neither one of us had any money, and worked just regular jobs, didn't make a lot of money, and we struggled a lot. And there's some of my favorite memories of my marriage is, as much as we struggled, I look back fondly on those times and remember how much fun we had and how much love we showed with each other and how much we just enjoyed being together, even though we were flat broke. And I love these memories I have of when we first got together as a couple. And, you know, so when somebody's in an affair, they kind of smooth over that and think, oh well, it wasn't good at all. It was terrible. It was so stressful and things like that. Then you come into the future part of where this person doesn't really see the future. And the reason for this is because this affair has created so much uncertainty about the future. When you're in an affair, you don't know what the future holds. You have so many questions. So usually if you're in a solid, stable marriage, you can kind of look into the future and kind of get an idea of what's coming. Later on, we're going to sell this house and, buy a bigger house or smaller house or whatever. We talked about starting that little side business that we've always wanted, or we talked about going camping and buying an RV and touring the country, things like that. But when you're in an affair, you don't know what the future is. So it's very stressful on the brain because you don't know what tomorrow holds. What happens when my affair partner, decides that they don't want to be with me? What happens when my husband or wife finds out about the affair? Are we going to reconcile? Are they going to want a divorce? What's going to happen to the kids? What's going to happen to the house? Where are me and the affair partner going to get married and be together forever? See, these are all questions you don't have an answer to. Some people want to fool themselves into believing they have an answer, but they really don't. So you have to realize that this is very stressful to your brain because you don't have a good grasp on what the future is going to bring. So this is very common in affairs because it's the way our minds work. It's the way that we reason out how our lives are going to be. And when you have that much uncertainty, we all have some uncertainty. We never know exactly what's going to be in our future. But when you have that much uncertainty, it's very stressful because you really don't know what's coming. Believe it or not, that's also part of the appeal of an affair because affairs thrive on uncertainty, dopamine, limerence, these things that are keeping you stressed. That's why affairs are so unhealthy. Um, you can also, um, this will cause you to see or not see, I should say, the consequences of decisions that you make now. The biggest problem is you're making decisions, life-changing decisions, at the worst possible time because you're in limerence, you're in a fair fault, you don't have a clear mind. You don't see things for the way they truly are. You're seeing everything from the filter of this affair. You're glorifying this affair partner. You're not seeing any flaws in this person. This person is wonderful. They make you feel so great, da 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 da. And so you're making life decisions based on basically somebody that's on drugs. Think about it. Think about as drunk as you've ever been in your life, and you're going to make life-changing decisions, you know, while you're intoxicated, to the maximum, and you're making life-changing decisions. This may sound dumb to some people, but this is exactly what you're doing when you're making these decisions in an affair fault, because you're making these life-changing decisions, and you're not in the mindset to make those decisions. But yet the sad thing about this is these decisions usually destroy everything. And, you know, you always hear people say, I've heard people say many times, I wish I could take it all back. I wish I'd have done this different. I wish I would have done that different. I wish I hadn't, made this dumb decision I made. Problem is, lots of times it's too late, because you made these decisions and it's fair fault, and now it's done. So another thing that may happen, and often happens, this is very common also, is neglect of not only your spouse, they also a lot of times neglect their children. uh, this is hard for some people to believe. They'll say, well, my kids are first. I put my kids before everything. My kids, my kids, my kids. I would die for my kids. I would, sacrifice anything for my kids' happiness and safety. But in an affair, they will not. They will put that affair partner above their children and not even realize they're doing it. They absolutely will. You will have people who will uh, be late for picking their kids up from school because they were spending time with their affair partner. They will neglect family time with their kids because they're focused on the affair partner. Lots of people believe that will never happen. They're wrong, because it happens all the time. You will be amazed at what limerence will do to your mind. When you get this affair fog, nothing else matters. You are 100% obsessed with the affair. Nothing else matters. You will focus on the affair. It will become the only thing that's important to you. You'll neglect your husband or wife. You'll neglect your children. People often neglect their jobs. Not focus on like they need to at work, causing issues. Lots of people lose their job over an affair because they are so focused on this affair and the affair partner that their work is really lacking in focus. So lots of times this has repercussions. It's impossible to make sound decisions when you're in an affair fight. It can't be done because you're not seeing things in reality. You're seeing things in a fantasy, in a fog. And nothing else matters. Nothing else is important. The only thing that's important is this affair, and this is the dopamine hit. This. You're no different than a drug addict. Need that next fix. Next fix. I need the next fix. You know. You know. Sometimes we've seen people with addictions, rob their own parents, steal from their own children, because they're addicts, and they will do whatever it takes to get that next fix. Believe it or not, affair partners aren't much different. They will neglect people. They will lie to people. They will use people. And you would think, and they think that they would never do this, but they will, because limerence, dopamine, it all goes together and builds this affair fog that makes these people make these decisions. And unfortunately, it burns down you know, all the trust uh, in these relationships, even between the children and the parent that's cheating, between, of course, them and their spouse. So hopefully, this will help you to recognize some of the pitfalls. Um, I've said this before, and I'll say it again. Don't try to recognize. Don't try to explain this to people who are in an affair, because you're wasting your time. They're not going to believe you. They're going to blow you off. They're going to say, you know, you're crazy. You know, I love my children and I do this, but it's not about loving your children. It's the same as an addict who's neglecting their children for their next fix. They're doing the same thing. And again, they'll deny this because this is extremely uncomfortable. They do not want to take responsibility for this. So hopefully this, helps people who may be seeing this in their marriage. I hope you're not. But if you are, this kind of an explanation of what might be going on. Nobody knows your spouse better than you. So you'll know them far more than any coach or counselor or, anybody else. So if this is happening to you, please seek counselor or a coach that can help you and help you process what's going on before you make any rash decisions about, what you want to do for your future. Uh, Again, my name is Chaplain Mike. The Trinity of Christ Ministries is part of our ongoing infidelity and intimacy series. You can find us on Facebook. You can also visit trinityofchrist.org. We have tons of information there, videos, everything to help people that may be going through some sort of crisis, not just adultery, but other things as well. Until next time, I thank you for watching, and I'll see you again.